call the meeting of March 13th, 2012 to order. Roll call.
The record will reflect that Councilmember Daigle is currently absent.
Are there any public comments on the closed session agenda? Seeing none, we will adjourn to closed session. will reconvene the meeting of March 13th, 2012. Is there a closed session report?
There's no closed session report this evening.
All right. Well, the first thing we get to do is something that gives me a great deal of pleasure, which is to recognize Fern Perkle and others, of course, who have done so much for the city, for her friends, which started Friends of Irvine Coast and then became Friends of Newport Coast. Now, because I know Fern and have known her for quite a while, I'm going to leave out some of the whereases because I think that gives it a sort of a distancing feel. But in the late 1970s, Fern and friends circulated mailers to support protecting open space in a coastal strip between Laguna Beach and Corona del Mar. And then in 1976, she formed the Friends of the Irvine Coast, whose main goal was to preserve public open space and protect natural wildlife habitat. In 1979, the Friends successfully lobbied the state to purchase the land currently known as Crystal Cove State Park. Right there, that's an achievement for a lifetime. But she wasn't through. In November 2002, the Friends changed the group's name to the Friends of Newport Coast to clear up the confusion because, as she said, Irvine doesn't have a coast. And over its 35-year history, the group helped protect almost 80% of the coast between Newport Beach and Laguna Beach. And in August of 2011, the Friends board said its work was done and voted to disband. And Fern was quoted saying, "It's not often that a nonprofit organization has completed its mission and is able to step into the history books." So I take great pleasure on behalf of the entire Newport Beach Council to recognize and commend Fern Perkle, founder and president of the Friends of Newport Coast, for her dedication to the preservation of habitat and publicly accessible open space in the central Orange County coast. And I'd like to give her this proclamation, as well as a few small gifts from us. I'll come down to do it. Thank you so much. Let me put this up for the Well, you don't get proclamations every day. Come around. All right. Ready to prove?
I want to thank you all. It's been a pleasure doing things to enhance Newport Beach, and I think the things that we did added more open space and gives pleasure to more people. So I think we accomplished what we started out to do, and as that little piece that Nancy read said, it's pretty rare when you start out as an organization and are able to accomplish what you set out to do and can close shop and say, that's all, we're through. So it's just a great pleasure to be here and to be recognized. Thanks very much. Behind me.
clarification of items on the consent calendar. Councilwoman Daigle?
None.
Councilman Henn?
None for me.
Councilman Selich?
I have none.
Councilman Hill?
Nothing.
Councilman Rosansky?
Nothing, thank you.
Councilman Mayor Pro Tem Curry?
I have none.
I have one, and I'm trying to see, Dave. Number 4. This is sort of timely because we had a presentation on green streets. And we have had the Green Building Task Force make recommendations to the city. One of the recommendations has been to make our streets greener with the use of permeable pavement from time to time. And some of the things that can be done is like not do the whole street, but do a strip of the street, particularly a center of the alley or something. I'm wondering, is this sort of thing being considered by our Public Works Department when we do something like number 4, where we're going to be going in and replacing some alleys?
Actually, it has been considered. Dave Webb, Public Works. On this particular project, we looked at it briefly, and one of the alleys, 205, you'll notice, we're actually using sand infiltration because we have sump in there. So we're putting grates in to infiltrate the water in. The entire alley has not been looked at yet, and we did have a discussion about just the cross gutter. For cost's sake, we've been pouring our alley in one uniform pour, and that saves money. If we did do a pervious pavement, we'd have to do a cross gutter first and then come back with a different pour. It might raise the cost a little. We've been watching it, and I know cost isn't the biggest issue here. My concern is how it's working. I've actually been watching some research on it, and they've had a couple articles lately about one raveling, and that's when the rock, because there's no fine, starts coming apart. And there's some evidence that that is happening on certain mixes, and I'm concerned about that because there's a lot of turning movements into garages there. The second is filling up the pores. And there's been some discussions about the sand and everything getting in the pores, and then it's not working the way you want it. And it takes additional maintenance to vacuum and things out. So we have been looking at it. We didn't choose it on this project. We do have some elements, but not through the areas. There's another project coming up, and that's Central Balboa. We're actually just starting on that. And we could maybe look at a test to do something like that.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you're at least considering it as the projects come up, because that's something that the Coastal Bay Water Quality Committee's been interested in for a long time, and we just want to, when we do have these opportunities, at least consider it. I realize that there's cost considerations. Thank you. All right, harbor charges.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and council members. I'm going to go through a PowerPoint presentation, and it wraps up a lot of different things in this, and would welcome your comments during the presentation. It might work a little bit better to wait until after, or maybe your questions will be answered in future slides. And just for the audience's benefit, we did make about 50 copies of this. I hope everyone got a chance to get one. It was also on our website. So I'm going to frame this in the context of two committees. One is the Tidelands Management Committee, as this council is aware of. This is the purpose and responsibilities here to really look at the bay, the Tidelands overall, with a long-term vision. And that includes the upper bay, the lower bay, our beaches, and other major components. And also to adopt what we're calling a Tidelands Infrastructure Management Plan, or TIMP, or TIMP, that includes what infrastructure needs the harbor will see over the short, medium, and long term, and also to look at a governance structure for the Tidelands now or eventually, and then to identify and establish a CAP, a Citizens Advisory Panel. You're very familiar with how those have worked, to assist the committee, encouraging public input throughout the process. And I think this committee's been meeting for at least a year, roughly on a monthly basis. They meet over at Oasis, like the third Wednesday of the month. So we've had some good attendance at those meetings, along with CAP's participation. There's also another committee called the Ad Hoc Committee on Harbor Charges, and they have a little different purpose and responsibilities. Those are to provide guidance to staff and the rest of the council as to the adjustment up or down or harbor-related fees and charges based upon the fair market value for the use of that Tidelands property. That includes the Balboa Yacht Basin, commercial piers, that's our major discussion today, moorings onshore and offshore, and also including setting in place a system or methodology to regular update those fees and charges. Also to meet with stakeholders and to develop a full recommendation to the City Council as to these adjustments and the likelihood of restricting these funds to take any incremental increase in those funds for specific purposes, including funding that TIMP. So similarly, the goal of this committee has been to determine fair market levels from revenue levels from harbor uses to appropriately fund those capital expenses. And I think the committee has noted that whatever the fees will be, it's not enough to meet the local needs. There isn't an expectation that the fees raised will cover all the needs of the harbor. There needs to be a general fund component to that. But it's important to set that fee profile to know what the gap will be. So let me talk a little bit about Newport Beach Tidelands. This is, after 70-plus years, the council, as you know, has been put a focus on looking at broadly at the harbor's needs. And those needs coming through the Tidelands Management Committee include about $160 million of projects, including $20 million more for a long-range dredging plan. The dredging itself, actually, it's not just the plan, to maintain the harbor at what should be design depth. The Tidelands Management Committee is soon to produce what they call a 10-year plan for harbor capital expenditures. And in the past progress with the council, I think, has been committing to starting and finishing the Rhine Channel dredging at a major savings because of the Port of Long Beach. And then, as folks in the harbor know, hopefully, the Lower Bay dredging project is about to start fairly quickly here. This is not a comprehensive project. Our $2.8 million or so contribution will be matched to the level of about a $7.5 million total project, which is less than what's needed, but it'll be an important start. So I'm going to step back again and talk about the Harbor Charges Committee and what their work plan has been. They've analyzed and determined fair market rates for moorings onshore and offshore, and that was in November of 2010, and there were meetings such as this one. We had a study session and a couple workshops and a couple council meetings about it to talk about what those rates should be, and those were indeed set in November of 2010. We then looked at the Balboa Yacht Basin, and those rates were, again, similar hearings, and those rates were set in December 2010. Commercial piers, it's focusing today primarily on marinas. That's now, basically spring 2012. There are other aspects of commercial harbor permits that will be examined in 12, and then the residential pier fee issue. People who have residential piers and or who rent space on those residential piers. That will be looked at as well. You can see other things that they've been looking at, including that thing I mentioned about dedicating an incremental increase in revenue to the Tidelands Capital Fund. So I'll go over, again, the phases. They looked at cost of service-based fees November 9th. They started to approach the fair market value approach for use of public property in December of 2010. Again, the yacht basin slips, that included apartments and garages, set them to market. Those were implemented over 3 years. And then the mooring rates were increased, both onshore and offshore, and those go up over 5 years. Again, into phase 2, we're underway now with the review of our commercial marinas, with the goal being to establish market lease rates for all commercial pier users, including moving to a percentage of gross lease system for marinas that are now under a yearly permit on a per square foot rate, and that per square foot is of Tidelands under use. And then specific terms for those other uses will be determined in the near future. And then they'll certainly, working with the Tidelands Management Committee, develop that long-term capital plan, and that would be adopted by the City Council eventually. And then an important part of this effort has been to revise things if we thought we weren't at market afterward. And indeed, the council lowered some of the Balboa Yacht Basin fees in December of 2011 for specific slip sizes. Again, residential piers, those are under consideration soon. I mentioned both residential pier fees alone and then the rentals. And I'd note that state law recently changed, and that law took effect January 1st, that allows the State Lands Commission to charge fees on what they call recreational or residential piers in state Tidelands waters. So let's focus here on commercial marinas. A number of examples here, area from Lido Marina Village here by City Hall to Newport Marina. This is a county facility. We'll talk about that in a little bit. and the Etco property there just past us here on the peninsula. This is an example of the top 15 largest commercial pier permittees, and this is their square footage of tidelands under permit. You can see the big folks, including California Recreation, there at the top. So currently there are about 56 commercial pier permit holders. I'd call about 8 of those large marinas and smaller marinas about, I'm not sure what that second note makes. Smaller marinas, about 21 of those. There are other uses from yacht clubs to restaurants to shipyards to rental boats and fuel docks. We're not proposing to apply our discussion today to those types of uses. That's, again, the next phase. These are on one-year permits. They're renewed annually. They're based on the square footage under permit, and the rate is about 36 cents per square foot per year. 2000, the rate was 28 cents per square foot per year. The proposal that the ad hoc committee is considering and asking the council to take a look at today, and not to adopt, today's not an adoption session, is that percentage rent would be set at 20% of gross income, or the base rent or the minimum rent would be on a square foot basis, and that would be $1.20 a square foot, whichever is greater. I mentioned moving from one-year permits to leases. We have a proposed lease document, kind of a term sheet that is available to the public. It's part of that packet and in front of the council, which talks about anywhere from a 5-year to a 30-year lease. And that's linked in part to the slip or pier usable life. So the better condition it is, the longer the potential that you could have the longer term lease. There'd be an option to renew, but those totals must be less than 50 years with an option fee. The rent would be as I stated, and the proposal that the committee is looking at is phasing that in over 3 years. There'd be rent adjustments every 5 years, and those adjustments would be and that would primarily be to base rent. There'd be a participation rent upon sale or refinancing, and there's a capital improvement expectation. This is another area that's a revision from the workshop that we had with the top 15. And this is where the proposal is that lessees must at least show us how they've invested a minimum of 2% of gross revenue in capital improvements. That's per year. But you could catch up over time. So again, changes since the workshop. We talked about phasing the increases in over 3 years. As to the capital improvement fund, the lessees would provide invoices or building permit valuation that total 2% or more of their annual income for capital improvement. And if it's not met in any 1 year, they would be the dollars would be remitted until those submissions were enough to exceed 2%. If this is approved by council, we envision this going forward this way. In May and beyond, we'd have individual lease agreements entered into with primarily the larger tenants first. We do have a consultant that we've had on board for quite some time. His name is Alan Cotton, and Alan would help us along with legal counsel in negotiating and preparing those leases. And then potentially the Harbor Fees Committee and the city manager myself would review any dilemmas that came up throughout that process, with the ultimate lease being approved by the city council, and that those new rental rates would apply after July 1st of 2012, again with the phased-in approach. So the next steps for you is certainly feedback from this study session. We really welcome everyone's comments. We would review and modify those recommendations further, if appropriate, with the Chargers Subcommittee. We talked about probably a need for another public workshop for additional discussion even before that comes back, in light of some of the emails I've received. And then that formal adoption by the council would be on or about April 10th, if indeed you continue down this path with the rental schedule. You'd adopt that in an ordinance and resolution and lease concepts. And then the second reading would be April 24th, and then implementation as noted. This is who to talk to for more information. Myself, Michael Torres with the City Attorney's Office, and then Chris Miller with Harbor Resources. And with that, I welcome your comments and questions, and certainly those of the public.
Questions for staff? Councilwoman Daigle?
Yes, a couple questions. You mentioned fair market value. I would assume that there's different methods out there to determine fair market value. Maybe you can provide an explanation of what kind of methods are out there and what method we settled on, how you settled on the rate.
There are certainly appraisal methods include, and included in that would be comparable existing leases in the harbor. And I think the committee focused on 2 existing leases of county marinas that are both paying 20% of gross. And then the appraisals tend to be in a somewhat of a range. I've seen anywhere from 22 to 16.
Okay.
And again, it depends on the situation.
Okay, and then these county marinas, they're similar to our city marinas and in the key aspects?
It's the committee's assertion and my assertion that they are. Yeah,
Okay.
these are operating marinas paying 20% of gross.
Okay. And then getting into a lease, transitioning into a lease, that would be a departure from our current practices. Can you explain a little bit more what you view as the benefits and the detriments of doing that, if any?
I think the benefits do involve the lessor's ability to, the holder of the lease, their ability to potentially finance longer-term improvements and get some assurity that they do have a long-term ability to use those tidelands. Because right now they are literally year by year, and those could potentially be moved at any time when the permit's up.
Is there anything detrimental that they would consider or for the city?
I think the feedback that I have heard about detriment is anytime you get into a percentage of gross discussion, the city is in your business. And we're nosing around and looking at what you're making, and that's the concern I've heard back from folks about that.
Okay.
Certainly getting the leases going from the city's perspective is a fairly significant staff
Right.
effort, and it certainly is by the person who would hold that lease too.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions from here? We're going to open it to public comment. I'm sure quite a few of you would like to speak. Can I see just an idea of hands about how many people will be commenting on this? Just one. You only get to talk once. Oh, not that many. All right. It does help, though, if you will, whoever wants to come first, and the rest of you sort of move down gradually so we don't have long waits in between the speakers. That will move things along. Okay. Who wants to go first?
Good afternoon. My name is Gary Pickett, and I'm the CFO for Ardell Marina. Newport Harbor is unique from nearly every other Southern California harbor. We commercial marina operators purchase land, built seawalls, parking lots, administrative offices, docks, piers, ramps, guardrails, and utilities to run our marinas. The city of Newport Beach did not participate in any of these efforts. This fact sets Newport Harbor apart from all other harbors reviewed by the city staff. Newport Harbor is different. The city's proposal does not consider this enormous investment that has been made in the development of these marinas over the years. The proposed commercial Tidelands lease agreement does not work for us for a variety of reasons. It has many flaws, but we are well aware of the needs of the harbor and the necessity to raise funds. We want to work with you, but we will also want an agreement that is fair to each party. We can provide you with alternatives that will give the city the targeted amount of funds that the city manager indicated at the February 23rd workshop. But now is not the forum to do so, nor can I explain it in 3 minutes' time. We also believe the city's proposal should be based upon fair market value. Instead, the current proposal's base rent would result in a fee 3 1/3 times what we currently pay, and the 20% of gross revenue will result in a fee 8 1/3 times what we currently pay. The participation in financing, refinancing, or sales proceeds is a harsh penalty against a harbor partner. Most importantly, the city has not followed a proper process to establish the value of the tidelands use. We seek to work with you in that process. Any fee must be based on fair market value, which takes into consideration the total facts, including the ownership of the adjoining lands. The marina operators are requesting the backup to support the proposed terms. There must also be a proper evaluation or valuation process to establish the fair market value. We're confident a cooperative process can achieve the increase that is fair, and we are prepared to commence immediately to participate with you. If the current proposal goes through, we believe the dynamics of the harbor will be impacted dramatically. The boating community will have to vacate Newport Harbor in large numbers. They are already reeling from the large increases in fuel prices. In addition, the marina, maintenance businesses, restaurants, and other retailers will be hurt. Local jobs will be lost. Since 1964, Ardell has been a proud part of Newport Harbor. We hope to remain a part of Newport Harbor in the future. I am a CPA, and prior to joining Ardell in June of 2010, I consulted and advised over 100 business entities. I don't know of one of them that could have sustained their business with a 20% of gross revenue hit. We respectfully request that the City Council allow us some time. It has been only 19 days since this proposal was introduced to us on February 23rd workshop. Again, we stand ready to assist you in coming to an agreeable solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Dan Purcell, Corona Del Mar. Thank you for having the personal fortitude to address this issue that's been neglected for over 50 years, and thanks for not caving into special interests.
All right. Somebody else, please? We're all through? I should close public comment? I didn't think so.
My name is John Vallely. My family's been involved with the Newport Harbor area and owner of real estate and business for about 80 years now. I identify certainly with Mr. Kiff's comment in the record that it's like, I think you call it a root canal to have a discussion about this. The only difference between the root canal that you have in discussions and the one that a property owner has to go through or a tenant of a property owner goes through is he gets the root canal without any anesthesia. In the early years, when my father first purchased his first property, he bought property on the waterfront with the idea that he'd have access to the water. He paid a premium for that property, for that access. There was never any discussion about a tideland fee. Later on, as a teenager, certainly, Nancy, you remember those days?
Well, I was just going to say,
Yeah.
you took me to the bus stop one time. I appreciate that.
As a teenager, I remember my father coming to the dinner table and saying, I can't believe it. We bought this property, and he was talking to me about private property rights, and that he had bought this property so he'd have access to the water and run a little boat rental. It was a seasonal business. He had to make his money in the summer, do his labor in the winter. But here was this guy suddenly being charged a tidelands fee. It was taken right out of his cash flow. I didn't think much of it as a teenager. Then I went off to school, learned a few things, started my own businesses, ran my own cash flow business here in Newport Beach, Newport Ski Company for many years, been involved in the boat rental business, been involved with the development of the real estate in Balboa, right across from the fun zone, a large building, where, by the way, we built our own seawall. We dredged out our own property. And we knew that at the pier head line, the federal government had a responsibility to dredge the balance of the harbor. And now Mr. Kiff says we need to do some dredging in the harbor. Well, if I've already dredged my area out, if I already built my seawall and have maintained it for 80 years, why would I participate in a federal responsibility for dredging out this harbor? I've paid federal income taxes, my family has, for 80 years. Where's my return on that? Why are you not pursuing the federal government to dredge out this entire harbor? It's their responsibility. We purchased our property on that waterfront with the idea that there was some effort that had been placed before us to cause us to do so, and that's that we were going to have a harbor here. To place that on the commercial property owners is absurd. We pay tenants and owners for the dredging, seawall construction, and maintenance, real estate taxes, FICA taxes, sales taxes, personal property taxes, state income taxes, and federal income taxes, which I just mentioned, are to dredge this harbor. We will have very little left if we keep going this way. This is progressive government progressing with taxes to take away private property rights.
Thank you. Thank you. You can hold your applause.
The idea that you could take away from a cash flow business as seasonal as they are in Newport Beach, 20% of their gross, and a fee for maintenance, when in fact we're required as business people in the private sector to do our own planned obsolescence, to maintain those assets in order to receive some sort of cash flow from it. And you're going to do the management of a private business operator's business? Now, they took our money, the big government, to do a lot of things in the general fund. How can we trust that you will spend this or save this money properly? The Tidelands fees that have been collected, have they been used for those things other than what they were designed for? What is the nexus between a Tidelands fee and my property, which I've maintained for 80 years? Am I going to build the seawall on Balboa Island now, including my own seawall, and maintain that seawall? Is that what you're asking me to do, pay twice? My mother has a property on the Balboa Island where I grew up. We ran a boat rental out of there for years and years, and then decided to go into the leasing operation where we would just lease space to little boats. She happens to be a homeowner sitting on a C1 zone property. She pays a Tidelands fee. 2 docks down, another person leases out space to private people, and they pay no Tidelands fee because they're not zoned commercial. How is that fair from one property owner to the other?
Thank you very much.
I have much more.
I'm sure you do. There will be another opportunity.
I hope I can talk to each of you individually, too. Thank you very much.
Next.
Madam Mayor, City Council members, my name is John Kirchie. I'm the managing owner of Lido Yacht Anchorage, and I'm here today to indicate our understanding of the need to provide funding for dredging and other harbor maintenance. However, we continue to have concerns, which we'd like to reiterate today. We previously provided the Council a letter dated March 7th, 2012, dealing with our concerns. We hope that all of you have had an opportunity to review the letter. We have owned Lido Peninsula since 1947. Like all other private upland waterfront property owners in the Bay, we were and we now continue to be responsible for the building and maintaining all of the improvements on our uplands as well as the adjacent tidelands. Newport Harbor is a unique residential harbor, not only because of its beauty, but because of the private ownership of the uplands, which we believe needs to be recognized as a unique private-public relationship with the city. Without the private uplands, there is no access to the tidelands. Private investment has built the seawalls, docks, provided utilities, parking lots, restrooms, and done all the necessary dredging on each of our properties. On February 23rd, 2012, the city held a workshop for the marina owners to announce a Tidelands rate increase and to introduce a lease concept for the Tidelands. That was only 19 days ago. As to the proposed rent, we understand there is a need to increase the Tidelands fees. Our disagreement is based upon what we understand the process used to determine the proposed fee. The city's identification of county-owned tidelands as a comparable for establishing fair market rents are not supportable or appropriate because of the undue compulsion to sign the lease because there was a take-it-or-leave-it approach on both of these cases. The leasing of lands and tidelands held in the public trust has an established process designed to ensure that the fees charged and paid are based upon acceptable standards of fair market rent. This involves hearings by disinterested parties, not an arbitrary fiat from a government agency whose mandate is to serve the public's interest. Failure to follow the standard to established processes to determine fair market rent runs a risk of destabilizing the entire economic, cultural fabric of Newport Harbor and all the public who use and enjoy it. There is already an established process for resolving these issues. Let's use the process and get the process going. As to the planned lease, we do not understand the need for a lease for the lease that is stated. The lease terms include concepts that are appropriate if the state, county, or city owns the uplands, but not when the uplands are private and the water is public. The uplands owners have built, maintained all of the water improvements, seawalls, and all of the land improvements. In addition, it seems unfair for the upland owners to have a lease term that requires additional payments to the city from financing or sales proceeds, or to incur fees for the option to extend the lease that you already have. We believe these proposed terms and conditions resemble a taking. We believe the city should be concerned about the unintended consequences, i.e. the risk of making irrevocable changes in the nature of the harbor and how it functions to serve the public. The 15 marina operators and more than 1,500 slip holders located in these larger marinas are just the tip of the iceberg that are affected by the proposal. The hundreds of marine industry workforce who support the boating community and the public serving activities will be affected. The unique character of Newport Harbor will be challenged because of the pressure, i.e. to push more intensive uses of the harbor. We have no evidence the city has followed a proper procedure to establish the fair rental value of the tidelands.
Thank you very much.
Please allow us adequate time to develop these, and we look forward to continuing the dialogue leading to a favorable resolution for all the parties.
Thank you. Next. Let's not have any applause, please.
Hi, gang. Mike Thompson. I represent the two sport fishing and whale watching businesses in the harbor. It's going to be tough for us to deal with this because a couple of my landlords are in the audience here. Mr. Valley's one of them. And when he gets his bill, he's going to drop it in my lap. And that's going to be tough to swallow. You know, we're charging less money to get on the boats now than we were a couple of years ago just because of the economic environment that we live in. The other thing, a lot of the businesses in the harbor are interrelated. You know, we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars at Gary Hill's Fuel Dock and Jesse's Shipyard. So we're going to have to pay our rent increase, and we're going to have to help them pay their rent increases. Kind of almost starts to seem like double dipping to me on the city's part. So anyway, that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, please. Was there no other comments? All right.
Norm Rust, 3300 Violito, Lido Sailing Club. Family business since 1971. We built the seawall through with 11 government agencies, Army Corps of Engineers, Tides and Tidelands, California Conservation, Coastal Commission, all my own expense. Built the office, all my own expense. The whole point about the fact that this is a different kind of marina where we own and or have long leases. Mine was 55 years on the property and did all the work. I mean, every time something goes wrong, the city says, the fire department comes out and says your backflow device isn't working properly. They don't come out and say we're going to fix it for you. They say fix it, It's all been us. And I think there's a way to have cost of living increases. It's called LIBOR or cost of living or something. And that, we could all understand that, although our cost of living, I mean, our rents are, the dues and the rents and the slip rents are going down, and you're asking for everything else to go up, going out. It doesn't work. So, like I said, the guy said it, this is really tantamount to a taking, and we don't appreciate it.
Thank you. Anyone else?
My name is Bob McCaffrey, and I watched the mooring issue very carefully. And a lot of negotiations went on, and basically, at the last moment, it was just a shove-it-down-your-throat approach, in my opinion. I hope that doesn't continue in the future.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? All right. If there are others, I suggest you move down so we can see how many more comments we have.
Good afternoon, Bud Reevely. I'm a residential pier owner, so I'm probably not in the proper perspective here, but I was kind of curious, who actually owns the property that you're going to lease to us?
These are city tidelands, which are assigned to the city by the state of California, so all the people of the state of California own it.
So is it possible that you may want a fee and the state may want a fee and maybe the federal government wants a fee? I mean, who really knows who owns it and who has the legal papers that says we can manage and lease and do this sort of
The
thing?
state has assigned all the land to the city, so they can't collect a fee off of it. They do tell us that in that assignment, we're supposed to charge fair market value for it.
Is that document available?
Yeah, it's called the Tideland, it's called the Beacon Bay Bill. It's Chapter 78 of the statutes of 1974.
Is that available here at the
I think it's on our
office?
website.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you're welcome to look at it. It's why the Balboa Bay Club exists. It's why the Beacon Bay residents exist.
I see.
It's a legal document approved by the state legislature.
Okay, thank you. I've had some experience with government leases. I was on a land lease, built a house on federal land one time. And my first year, I paid $25, and that was an annual fee. And then they suddenly got the idea that perhaps we ought to do fair market value. My property was at 7,000 feet with no road that we put in ourselves and water we put in ourselves and road maintenance that we did ourselves. And the Forest Service said, we're going to do a fair market value. I could only use my cabin 3 months out of the year because the snow was sometimes 20 feet deep. They used a fair market value on property that was at 4,000 feet year-round. City property, actually county property, county-maintained roads and all utilities. And it was a totally unfair but arbitrary decision. Now, I can see maybe that's coming down for the residential owners, and I think they should take notice of what's going on here. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Seeing no one, I'll bring it back to council. Any comment? No? Well, I have a couple of questions, particularly for the committee. How do we deal with the question of, say, the Ardell situation, the Valley situation, where they say, but we've owned it for a long time. We're the ones that did the dredging. We're the ones that built the walls. Do we take that into consideration? Or I mean, how do we... That does seem to me an interesting point. Is there any acknowledgement of that?
Well, I think in discussions with our consultant that, those improvements were certainly put in, but for most of the instances, they were put in for the improvements of the uplands. The uplands wouldn't be usable without the bulkheads being in.
Okay.
And it's standard procedure in other marinas to take the approach that we've taken in the approach the committee's recommending to the full council.
And to move on that, also, as I'm not a boating person, so I'm not really, I have to apologize, I don't know a lot about other harbors, but the point that we are very distinctive in the fact that we have this private-public, are we that distinctive, or are there others that have the same issues with the...
Well, we are somewhat unique in that, and indeed, that if you were to appraise the property, they would assign a higher rate, upwards of 25% or more, if indeed the same entity owned the uplands and the tidelands. And
Okay.
the appraisals we've seen have made those adjustments and landed more towards this number.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'd point out that on the Balboa Bay Club, which the city controls both the uplands and the tidelands, the rental percentage there is 30%, I believe.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Curry?
Well, first of all, I want to thank my colleagues who served on the committee to try and generate a proposal. It is perhaps the most thankless job we have in the city, and I know they all worked very hard and diligently at it. What I think we've heard today, and what I've heard in my conversations with people who are major property owners in the harbor, is that everybody acknowledges the need to raise fees, and we have some very serious needs relative to dredging and relative to the other harbor improvements that need to go on, that need to be equitably shared with, that are going to be paid by property owners throughout the city, but need to have participation of those who are users of tidelands. For all the private property speeches, tidelands are state properties that we manage and trust pursuant to the state constitution. They belong to the people. Now, having said that, I am sensitive to the issues that, we have sort of, while we've been working on this for quite a while, sprung it on folks with not a lot of time to digest it, and that there may in fact be other ways to get to where we need to go with this. And in the conversations I've had, people have suggested some and their willingness to come forward with some. What I think we ought to do is take a little time and have some listening sessions and allow the harbor community to come forward with some ideas, with the proviso that they need to be substantive and they need to be serious ideas. To tax me $1 and I'll be happy and you can go away is not going to work. You saw that before. What will happen is we'll end up going back to the proposal on the table. But I believe that the harbor community could come up with some ideas that might make this work. I'm concerned that some of our strategies may not work for everybody. The least idea may work for some. It doesn't work for others. I'm concerned about the economics of what we're doing in today's economy and whether they work for everybody's business or not. And I'm particularly concerned about the fact that we are getting involved in people's business, and it's going to make a big difference to the underlying economics of people who have had businesses here for a long time, and we need to be very, very thoughtful about how we do that. So I appreciate the effort, and I would like to see this go back for some more conversation with some of the user groups and stakeholders with the understanding of where we need to go. Not that, we're just going to say no, and that'll be no, but understanding where we need to get, and is there a better, more equitable, fairer way to phase this in a way that works within the business model of our businesses on the tidelands.
Councilman Hill?
I guess I have a couple of comments I'd like to make and a couple of questions to ask. One of our speakers talked about the federal responsibility, and I would be, obviously I'm very frustrated that our great federal government doesn't stand up to their responsibility. I guess we can take care of that at the next election maybe, but the reality is you have the choice of losing the harbor or doing something yourself, because the feds aren't going to take care of it. And so I don't think we have a choice on that. I would like to know, I think I know, but I'd like to hear how the Tidelands revenues are handled. It's my understanding that they are reserved and used for Tidelands activity only. Is that not the case?
That's correct, Mr. Hill. If anyone is curious about the overall Tidelands Fund, we report it annually in what's called our CAFR, and that's just out. And what that will show is it shows the revenues coming in from the Tidelands and the expenditures going out. And many folks have quibbled with our calculation. But what they forget is that the Tidelands are not just the harbor. The Tidelands are also the ocean beaches. So when we have a emergency response call, a police call, all of our lifeguards, that's all funded through the Tidelands Fund. So it tends to be quite upside down in the range of probably $11 to $12 million. But it is an appropriate way of budgeting those Tidelands and indeed approved by the State Lands Commission. So, and I'll jump back to your comment about the federal government and certainly invite other questions, Mr. Hill. When we talk about going back to the federal government, I think from Councilmember Daigle to Mayor Pro Tem Curry and others, we've all worked pretty hard. We have a federal lobbyist. We've had them for quite some time. We've switched lobbyists to try and get, and this is a bad word, it's an earmark. And when you talk about the change in the government, indeed, they're not going towards more earmarks. Indeed, they're going away from earmarks. And we've probably tried for upwards of 10 to 12 years to get some more money appropriated to the Lower Bay project. And I know this is frustrating to the message too, but it was actually this administration that first put the amount of money in the budget for the Lower Bay project. It wasn't the previous administration, it was this administration. That's why we have the $7 million, the $4 million that we have today. So battling the federal government on the federal responsibility is a tough battle, and one we've been waging. And if folks have better ideas as to how to go about it, I'm all ears.
I would acknowledge that a 20% hit seems like an incredible burden. I look at my company, and if I had a 20% hit on it, I probably wouldn't be in business anymore. But I'm not sure that that's the number to be looking at. To me, it's the delta between what's being paid now and 20% to see what the increase would be. And so I'd like, as we go forward, and I certainly support the concept of spending a lot more time talking about this, I would like to see what the delta is as we move forward. And then I'm involved in a lot of appraisal work as it relates to non-wet real estate. And so I'd like to look at the process that's used and become more familiar with that appraisal process, because I think that truly that's where a lot of the discovery needs to take place.
Councilwoman Daigle?
Yes, we are in a recession, yet many people that I talk to feel as if government is just expanding from health care, from a lot of other areas, and people feel a great frustration and a great anger about the direction of where government in general is going. I think the approach that we need to be exploring here is how to build upon our heritage. And in our community, we work together, we collaborate, we form partnerships. And that's why today our labor negotiations, we're getting results more than other cities. Other cities have these intractable negotiations going on. We've built community centers and swimming pools together, and we did that through collaboration and through partnership. And as far as our harbor goes, I agree with the approach. We need more time to work with the user groups. And I think, too, the value of those uplands needs to be considered in our calculations. Our harbor, for the last 70 years, has not been maintained by the federal government. It's been because people in our community are self-starters. And because of the Ardells and the Kirchies and the Crowells and these people that have been in our community for so many years, that's who's really built our harbor and given it its value. And so with respect to the people that have built this harbor, we need to work with them. And that's who we represent. We represent those people, our community. So I would like to see more work done with the user groups, with the community. And I would agree, it's very unclear as to, with the fair market value, how you settled on this method. There's got to be other methods out there. So I don't feel informed enough at this stage to say, you know, you've gotten the right method down in terms of how to do this. But I would agree with the Mayor Pro Tem's suggestion that we need to look at working more closely with our user groups in partnership with them.
Any other discussion? Well, I think that, as you remember through the presentation, that was one of the options, was to have at least another outreach meeting, and I think that most of us are in agreement with that. So that give you the direction as far as the council?
It does, Madam Mayor.
All right, thank you.
Well,
Councilman Stowich.
Yeah, just to be clear here, because no one wants to see their fees raised. I mean, we've been down this road twice, once with the moorings and one with the Balboa Yacht Basin. So we're not looking at some protracted system here. Appraisals are opinions of value. They're all over the place. We've seen them all over the place. I think that you've heard the city manager say that the value can range from 22 to 16% based on appraisals that we've looked at, appraisal approaches. We have an upward number of 30% that we get from the Balboa Bay Club. So 20% was not chosen because picked out of the air at random. There was some rationale to it, and it's a middle-of-the-road approach. So I know that folks potentially don't like that number, but quite frankly, our goal here is not to raise revenue. Our goal is to meet our obligations under the state tidelands grant, and the process that we have to go through is get a fair return for these state lands that are entrusted to the city. So I'm interested in hearing other ideas and everything, but I don't want to see a protracted process on this. It's not going to do us any good because they're going to get opinions all over the place on it.
Thank you. This is the way things work when you have something called the Brown Act. And we have 3 people that have worked on this, and they've worked on it a long time, and they know this stuff. But then you've got 4 of us who know about what you know in terms of this is when we see it, it's about when you see it. So we also have to go through a learning process, and it can be frustrating for someone who's worked on it as closely as the committee has, that we're asking questions that they answered a long time ago. But we will have more time for you to have input. All right, we'll move on now to the revision of the fire.
I also just wanted to thank everybody in the audience for your comments and the submittals via email. They're appreciated, and we will be talking with you more. So thank you.
Yeah, Dave, I guess I would only have one more suggestion, and that is that we work to get this input meeting scheduled as soon as we can. We
agree.
To echo Dave's comments, we don't want to drag this process out.
Okay, so this next item.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor, pursuant to the advice I received from the city attorney, despite that I, along with about 80% of the people in my district, live in that fire zone, or at least as it was originally designated, I understand that I am to recuse myself from this matter, so I'll be stepping away.
All right, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. We will call you when you can bless us again with your presence.
So, Madam Mayor and council members, I'll try to frame this issue up for you as Fire Marshal Gamble is preparing the presentation. We came to you a while back, a short while back, about with a map with a lot of red on it.
Hold on, Jen.
Sure.
If you're having a conversation, could you please leave the chamber? Thank you very much.
Can even wait a little longer. We're still on time, I think, here.
Oh, yeah, we're early.
Yeah, they may use it to fight a fire. Yeah.
They might dip in front of your house there with a bucket. I live in town. Yes, it is.
We have a lot in the audience about this one, yeah.
I'm surprised.
Well, maybe Chief Poster and Chief Gamble helped avoid all the problems, so we'll see.
Okay.
Ready, Ron? You want to wait? Yeah, we're earlier than we thought here, so.
I'm surprised there wasn't more public comment. I thought we'd have a line of people. Oh, I mean, that's okay.
There could be a fire, come on. There is, somewhere there is.
More likely a medical call.
There he is, yes. Sorry, Chief Poster, we got done with the previous item quickly, so more quick. So you're on, if you're ready.
I've never slept.
Well, I think she could, occasionally do it.
You can't. Yeah.
I think we should.
Can we get that laid out?
We're good. This is good enough, I think. Madam Chair, members of the council, Scott Poster, Fire Chief, to make a presentation on a revision to the very high fire hazard severity zone map. Before we get started with the revision of the map, I wanted to kind of explain to the council the hazard, some of the problems we're looking at. Unfortunately, I was an incident commander at the Corral Canyon fire in Malibu. Pretty dramatic fire, lost a lot of homes, lost a lot of property. Those are the type of things we do not want to have happen in Newport Beach, but it did give me the opportunity to bring some footage of similar topography and a similar hazard that we have in Newport Beach. So I wanted to take a couple minutes. This is a very short presentation, but it kind of depicts what we're looking at possibly in Newport Coast area. Go ahead. So the two ways we can reduce our fire hazard is by hazard reduction and fuel modification. We've done hazard reduction in Newport Beach with our special fire protection areas in certain areas lining Buck Gully and Morning Canyon, as well as some areas up into Newport Coast as well. And our fuel modification zones. These are intact in Newport Beach and methods that we use currently today to protect the homes from wildfire. Next. This is a picture of the fire in Laguna coming up the canyon. This is something that is a possibility through the state park area as it enters towards Newport Beach. This is a fire I was at in Topanga. This particular structure is up about a 100-foot, 200-foot wall. That fire is about 80 to 100 feet straight up in the air. I'm actually standing right towards a propane tank in the middle. We saved that house. There was defensible space there for us to save that house. We even saved the propane tank, and the house did not burn. Had an engine company there, the engine company up the road were able to protect that house during the structure with good clearance, and they did provide some clearance down the canyon. Go ahead. This is a slope. If you're looking at a slope like this is about a 45-degree slope, and if you look, there's dry grass is burning into seemingly green trees, and you'd be telling yourself those trees don't burn. If you're in the right conditions, those trees burn, which gives you about an 80-foot flame length. If there's anything hanging out over that canyon, it's a porch, a patio, accessory structure, it's going to have direct fire impingement and burn. This is a video of some ember showers off some ornamental vegetation. Now take a look at what's coming off that tree. Those are embers. This is what it looks like at the fire line when the fire's coming through houses. It's a lot louder than this, but there's little fires everywhere. We lost a house here. From those embers go straight through. You'll see them coming. Here's a pond flying over. Those embers will go straight into a house and light that house on fire pretty quickly here. Picked up that house. You can see the fire starting and just moves right on through that structure. So there's a wide wall of flames that come up these canyons. Go ahead. There's a fire captain in Malibu run into this situation. And these are undefensible homes. Once they start burning, they're gone. You can't just block and do defensive actions when these homes are burning. And what we want to do is prevent that from occurring. That captain was right. They lost a lot of homes on that. And that was actually during the middle of the day. It looked like it was at night. That was the middle of the day. It turns dark when the fire comes. These are embers from an ember shower. See how it cascades over the road? This is what we want to prevent from hitting the homes in the Newport Coast area, or anywhere in Newport Beach for that matter. Fire with the wind driven right behind it will blow through this house. It'll go from starting to be on the ground within 45 minutes. Faster than a fire in your fireplace, that house will be down on the ground in a foundation. Gas picked up, the gas pipe burned off that house and went right through the house, and you can see the wind blowing everything straight through that house. These are the embers. This is a firefighter within the embers right there. This is our enemy. This is why when we say ember intrusion, ember showers, this is it. This is a picture of what the embers look like as they're approaching the houses under wind conditions. Go ahead. And this is what it looks like when you're standing on the street. You've got some grasses or brush that's already burned, mild wind. You're only talking about a 30 to 35 mile an hour wind right here. But look what happens when there's the ember showers as it goes blowing across the road, up canyon, into homes. You don't see this footage very often, but this is basically what's burning the homes that come into contact with it. Yeah, this is Crawl Canyon. And this is what happens. It picks up the brush, and then you got an out-of-control fire. So that is what can happen. Actually, it has happened many, many times. And that is the main reason the state of California created the very high hazard fire severity zone. How do we stop catastrophic fires from occurring? It took a long time for them to map the state, and when they did map the state, they determined high hazard areas. In those high hazard areas, they have passed a law, a state law, that has every single city, including everywhere in the state, has to adopt these laws or this zone so that they can protect the homes and stop catastrophic fire. This is Upper Buck Gully right here. If you look at the vegetation here and the dry grass on the side, if we had a wind coming through here, the homes up on the left-hand side of the canyon would definitely be endangered. And right now they are included in the special fire protection area. However, those homes on the perimeter, although would be impacted by fire, it's the homes directly behind them. If we can't stop the fire at that ridge, if we can't stop those homes, once they start on a fire to put those fires out, they're going to move from house to house. And that's what we want to stop. The Upper Buck Gully area is a dangerous area, and there needs to be some type of mitigation factors for those conditions, as you can see here. If you picture that slope fire you just looked at, this is it. This is the same basic thing. It gets started on the bottom of the canyon, and it moves up with Santa Ana wind condition. When the relative humidity is low, fuel stick is low, that fire will move. And that's what we want to try to avoid. Okay? This is also in Buck Gully. This is fuel mud. This is what we want to see occur. There is defensible space here. There is a way the firefighters can get in. Those houses are safe. If the ember showers come into those homes, we have time to stay there and put any fire that exists out. This is what we're trying to do throughout the state. Go ahead. Another example of defensible space, a fire burned completely around this entire structure, but no problem with the structure. This is an example of what fuel modification can do. Okay. Newport again, defensible space is what we're looking for. Go ahead. In the Newport Coast area, some of the concerns that you've probably heard, as well as I've heard, and I heard it when we were talking at the Oasis Senior Center, is what is going on in Newport Coast? What's the hazard? This picture to the left here, that yellow area, is actually the high hazard zone. When those homes were built in Newport Coast, they were built in the high hazard zone. It is already on their deeds. It's on the tract maps. It's already proclaimed on the property. That's the high hazard zone. And we have verified that as recorded already. This is a zone that OCFA built the standards to. When we annexed to Newport Coast, those homes were built by OCFA standards, Orange County Fire Authority. Those standards included homes abutting the vegetation to have higher standards than other homes built in the area. So there are some provisions already in the homes in Newport Coast. So there is some protection in place for that area, but they were already built in a high hazard zone. As a matter of fact, we pulled some of the records on these homes. Some of them say very high hazard zone, and some are high hazard zone. Either way, as people are worried about insurance issues, they're already in a zone. They're already labeled, they're already marked, they're already recorded. That already occurred. Go ahead. The state gave us their map back in after 2007, and they blocked out this whole area for Newport Beach. It's a pretty large swath. And when I got here, we looked at what actions did the city of Newport Beach take when the state gave us our first blush of this map. We cleaned up the edges and did a few changes for that map. So since over the last few weeks, we have taken a look at what the state actually gave us, and we've used some more diagnostic skills and ability to look at exactly what that map, what we can do with that map. Let's hold that for a second. So myself and my crew, we did an aerial reconnaissance, took a helicopter, went through the canyon area. We did on-the-scene wind readings when the Santa Ana conditions the other day was blowing up the 73 corridor. We checked the wind levels in all the canyons and passes up in Newport Coast, what the wind speeds were, recorded them all. And we found that some of the areas the state had, they didn't measure the wind velocities correctly. We found that we could have 50-mile-an-hour wind in the top of the 73, but when it gets to the lower part of Buck Gully, it was 10. And the flags were changed. There's the way the canyon's configured, go down to Buck Gully, it changes the wind speeds. So we figured there needed to be adjustment in the way we put the model in place. We looked at our defensible space, our special fire protection area, the building construction, traditional fire corridors in this area, the fuels, the slope, and the interface with the wildland, and refined the model. In other words, we took the picture that the state gave us and we reduced the size to a hazard risk, more of a hazard map appropriate for this area. Go ahead. It's hard to see in this picture, but the darker areas, the grayish areas, are the state red areas, and the lime green picture to the right, if you look over here, this is the whole zone, this is the state red areas, this is green areas is going to be our recommendation for an adjustment to the state map.
Up or down?
Pardon me?
You're saying that we would eliminate the red?
Right.
On
We'll
that
move
map.
right on.
Okay.
Go to the next picture. This is a picture of our recommendation for Newport Beach. This is the green. This takes out some of the... Sorry about that. This is the area over here above San Joaquin Hills and below the 73. And this area over here by Pelican Hills is over here. We did some due diligence to determine our fire corridor is Crystal Cove, coming down Los Trancos, which is a problem, and also the upper Buck Gully area. We figure fire will carry here, fire will carry here, fire will, hold on, technical issue, fire will carry through here. So we redefined the zone to account for what we feel the topographical and the local issues should have been included by the state to begin with. They just weren't. We never did correspond and dialogue with the state of California when they did this map, and we feel that these adjustments would be appropriate.
Is the map on the screen supposed to be the same as the map down here?
It is.
Because it doesn't look the same to me.
Yeah, it does.
Might be the different color and
Yeah. But the overall shape, look at it with the point up there.
Right.
And
If you look at the green map, the green is what we're proposing. The red is what we want to extract from.
No, I'm just looking at the two canyons going down to the beach there. It looks like it's yellow in the drawing here.
Okay.
And it wasn't on the other drawing you had up, and it's on that drawing.
This is a special fire protection area we already have in place. This is already in the Newport
Okay,
Beach
so
Code.
is that Morning Canyon?
This is Morning Canyon. This is Upper Buck Gully. And this is Lower Buck Gully. These will still stay within the SFPA, but the high hazard zone, traveling. Thank you.
so the special fire hazard zone on Buck Gully and Morning Canyon that we already have in place, you feel that's adequate?
Yes, we need to keep those two zones in place.
So that's why they're not shown on that other map, because
That's
they're not on
correct.
that other map.
There's differences between the special fire protection area and the very high hazard zone. The homes that abut Morning Canyon and the homes that abut the interface in Buck Gully are in the zone currently, and there's no recommendation to change any of those current things in process at this time. In Lower Buck, right.
Some of this area, is this the Port Streets here? That looks like Fashion Island. Oh, that's Big Canyon Reservoir, okay. So can you define those areas there?
That's Spyglass.
Spyglass, okay.
And then Newport Ridge.
Okay.
So some of the concerns we've heard from the homeowners primarily are cost, the fuel modification, and insurance concerns. The insurance concerns have already been handled. The insurance underwriters have already proclaimed this area a certain risk. That's already taken place, so there's really no discussion for that. As far as the fuel modification zones, they are already in place. The changes that the high hazard zone will make is changes to the building construction, and there are certain things in a high hazard zone that will affect any structures within the map should they be developed further. In other words, if their footprint of the home is expanded over 50%, there will be some additional construction requirements along the Newport coast. The exterior homes along the interface in the Newport coast are already protected on the exterior parts.
Do you have an overlay map? When you started, you said that we already had part of the community that was built to the higher standards already. Do you have an overlay map to show the areas that would be impacted that aren't already built to that degree?
In this map here, if you look at the purple zones, those are fuel mod zones. Those fuel mod zones were built as OCFA requirements through the annexation. The homes around those perimeter are already built with exterior protection. They're
Do you have a pointer that you can give to the chief?
The star on top.
So can you repeat your comment then?
Okay. These are fuel mod zones, the purple, that were required by OCFA when we annexed it, and any new development will require those as well. The homes built within inside there, the homes that abut the fuel mod area already have increased protection standards. They've already have exterior protection, glazed windows, and they've already got standards in any type of outcropping, and there's in a fuel mod zone, which means they're pretty safe. However, the homes within those developments, one street back, are not. Those are built with very low requirements. Those built after 2007 had stringent requirements, but these were built between 88 and 2007, most of them. And those interior homes do not have any fire protection within them at all. It's just other than stucco, and there's Class A roofs.
And
Very, very minimal construction was done to those homes before.
And is that description the same for those properties that have the deed restriction or the deed notation in them?
That is correct. These properties here, within this area here, we've outlined this out. We're preparing for some homeowner presentations. These areas in here, they are all deeded, and they're on the track maps as very high hazard fire protection areas declared already. And
so
some of them are declared high hazard area. There's depending on which they did at the time, but they're all high hazard areas.
And so within the green area, the homes that do not have such notation are the areas that are outside of the purple enclosed.
No, they're inside, too.
They're
aren't they?
inside. They're inside. These are perimeter homes. Can we go back a little bit? If you look here, this is a fuel mod zone. The homes here are inside that purple. These are all homes in here. They're all homes within here, and they're homes along in here. Those homes inside the perimeter of the fuel mod zone do not have the increased building standards. The homes on that touch, that abut the vegetation, do have some standards that OCFA put in place.
And we also have then, the older homes along Buck Gully don't have anything probably.
It depends if they've been rebuilt. According
Right.
to our special fire protection area, the homes along Buck Gully, once they are reconstructed, then they have to meet the SFPA requirements are pretty stringent. Newport Beach has adopted some very stringent requirements for the SFPA, which I would not advise to change. That involves all the homes on Morning Canyon and Buck Gully. Now, should there be a fire that starts in Morning Canyon or Buck Gully, that's a pretty good vertical slope. That fire will burn straight up that hill and will have a direct flame impingement on the homeowners, that abut the canyon.
All right, then to continue with Buck Gully and Morning Canyon, we have in Newport Coast then, under these new things, that the inside the purple areas, those inside homes, as they're rebuilt over 50%, are going to have to meet some new standards.
That is correct. Those homes, once the map is adopted, those homes in the green on this Newport Beach version of the high hazard zone, then all homes within that green will, if they're reconstructed over 50%, will have to have increased standards.
And I cannot tell from the map how far off, say, Buck Gully, the map
goes right to here. Right at
I know where
PCH.
Buck Gully is, but I can't tell how far. In other words, are we in the same situation in Buck Gully where we have the perimeter is well protected, but the inner houses, are they also going to have to be doing some things?
No.
Oh,
No,
okay.
they're not. The houses that abut the canyon, Buck Gully and Morning Canyon, are in the zone. We're going to keep them in a special fire protection area, It'll be PCH south or west, actually. We're not recommending it as not in the zone, but we're going to maintain it within a special fire protection area.
Do we have the authority to make this change, or is this a study that your office has gone through and now we have to go to the state and apply for a change?
Once we make findings based on building construction, topography, wind speed, the things that were not taken into consideration by the state, we will bring back to the council an official version of the map with findings. Once and if the city council verifies these findings and decides to go with this map, we will take that to the state, and I don't think that they can rebut your decision.
Thanks for taking the time to go out and do some field work and fine-tune the proposal and not just accept the original map at face value. Appreciate that.
And
So the direction, we did want to present this to you this afternoon and show you the revisions. We're not asking for specific direction because it's a study session item, but if you had, unless you had other comments, these are the maps that Chief Poster and his staff will present to the homeowners associations next, and we would come back to you after those meetings with the formal adoption.
Councilman Henn?
Yeah, so it's still not clear to me. I understand that the homes included in the map for alterations above 50% and the construction of new homes, they have to meet very stringent new standards. But then there are some other standards, too, about clearing vegetation around existing homes for 100 feet from the house, subject to where the property line is and that sort of thing. It's still not very clear to me how many more homeowners are going to have to do something once this map goes into effect. How many more homeowners will have to take action to be in compliance with the standards? Do you have any sense of that?
we know we have approximately 5,000 homes that are affected one way or the other by the zone, the state zone. We have not measured what the new Newport Beach impact would be in homes. We can calculate that. However, the way it works is if a home abuts vegetation, if you're at a slope, if you're next to actually the wildland interface, that's where the homeowner will need to take some action. In most of the areas in this zone, there is already fuel modification in place. It's existing. They just need to maintain it. Whether we adopt or not, they need to maintain that fuel modification. Right. In Buck Gully and Morning Canyon, the impact will be those homeowners need to do some dead and dying mitigation, and also if they do reconstruct their homes, then they have to have some new modifications to the construction standards. So the effect of anyone who's touching the grass, anyone who's touching the brush, those people already have that problem now. It's not new to them. They're already in brush clearance programs as we go through and work on fuel modification with them and mitigation measures for those that don't have fuel modification. So this is nothing new. The changes will be once you have the zone in place, those homes that are interior, that are not touching the brush and wildland area,
there will be some building standards in place for them if they increase their footprint by 50%.
Building standards, that's right. But then there was this other issue of making changes in vegetation around your home for certain homes. So the homes in the interior will have to meet those standards as well?
No. The homes where we do our vegetation management, our fuel modifications, are the ones that actually abut the vegetation.
Okay.
So that would be those along the ridge of Morning Canyon, Buck Gully, and where they exist now in the current footprint.
I guess I was just trying to get a sense, once this goes into effect, how many homeowners are going to get a notice or a knock on the door that says, you have to do something more than you have been doing already?
It's primarily the same homeowners that have been
It's
getting it all
primarily the
along.
same homeowners now.
So there's not that many more homeowners that would be affected than already are by those.
Just to go on that, right now we currently inspect about 235 homes in Buck Gully. Out of that, taking out the Morning Canyon aspect of this, because those will still be in the dead and dying, those other homes along Buck Gully that are in this very high fire hazard map will have to do a defensible space reduction of fuel vegetation more than the dead and dying that they currently do. So and that's where we will work with them to come up with a plan individual with each home in that section.
And how many homes do you think that is, Ron? Chief?
I think to say 100.
About 100 or so?
100.
Of the 235?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a subset of that.
That's the upper Buck Gully from PCH up.
Well, I echo Councilwoman Daigle. This is going to be greeted, I think, with appreciation by many of the residents who were going to be included in the zone and aren't now. And this seems to be a very good recognition of our topography, and thank you so much for the work. Councilman Selledge?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great improvement. That the other map that the state sent, I thought was really overreaching, so I'm happy you did the further analysis, and this looks pretty reasonable to me.
And just real quickly, to respond to Councilmember Hill's question, if you make the findings of substantial evidence to modify the map, then that's not rebuttable by the state. So it's final once the local agency makes those determinations.
All right. Is there any public comment on this item?
My name is Jamie Starr. I didn't come to speak on this, but I was a newspaper photographer, and I was the first person behind the first fire truck at the Laguna Fire. I was at the top of Emerald Bay and the top of the world, where one home didn't burn. That was a newer one that had space. Everything that the fire chief has said about the fires and the embers, until you've lived through this, and I've been through all the big ones, San Diego, Malibu, and Laguna. And the embers are just unbelievable. If you're not in turnout gear, and I covered the Laguna Fire in shorts and flip-flops because I was at the beach and turned around and saw this huge plume of smoke. What they do, they get under the shingles. And the houses, a lot of them, they either burn from the top down or the house next door. On these inland houses, the outside perimeter has space, but if you get spot fires inland, a house catches on fire, and then the curtains inside the house next door catch on fire through the windows, and the houses burn from the inside out, actually. The other thing, during the Laguna Fire, I went up, none of the Newport Coast was in there, and I drove up because I had pass so I could get through the fire lines and whatnot. I drove up to the top of Newport Coast Road, and because I was very concerned that we were going to, in Laguna, the fires, we had spot fires all the way through, all the way down to the beach, at Crystal Cove where all the trailers burned. I was there. There's no way when there's a wind behind these fires, the fire department cannot stop them. And and I drove up along Newport Coast, and there was a wall of fire trucks. And luckily, by that time, about maybe 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, the wind had died and started to turn, and they started backfiring up by Signal Hill. But that whole Newport Coast area burned. And in Laguna, at the top of Emerald Bay, When I first got there, I drove up and parked, and there was a guy running in and out of his house. He'd run out, and he'd run in a circle in the street and run back inside. And I asked him, I said, can I look off your porch? Because the fire was coming right down that gully that's on the outside of Emerald Bay. I went out on the porch. I looked down at the bottom of the gully. The fire was maybe 100 feet up the slope. I turned. We both ran out the front. I turned around and looked in the open door, and the flames were already on his porch. And this house was cantilevered out over the gully with the brush underneath it. It was a Boy Scout fire starter. And the next day, I came back to photograph the ruins of Laguna, and I couldn't, the house was gone. There wasn't even a foundation. It was built on wooden stilts, and the road just stopped. And other people at least had chimneys and foundations. This family had nothing. So it's really important to protect the whole area. So that's all I wanted to tell you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? No. Are there public comments on non-agenda items?
Mayor Gardner and members of the council, my name is Jim Mosher. This is actually a comment on the closed session, and because you're holding it in two parts, I don't know if this is actually coming up or not. But item D in the closed session agenda is your conference with our labor negotiators, evidently involving working out memorandums of understanding with several organizations, including the police, employees, and the police management associations. Since you've chosen to keep the public out of the discussion, even though we are the ultimate employers, my ignorance about this is, as has been pointed out, quite profound. Nevertheless, I'd like to remind you that under the previous memorandum of understanding with those two groups, starting in July of last year and effective through December 31st of last year, under the old MOU, the police and police management employees agreed to set aside 3.5% of their wages towards their pensions, which is a larger share than evidently they had paid in the past. As I understand it, those MOUs have expired on December 31st, and at your January 10th meeting, as Agenda Item 8, you agreed to endorse what are called certain side agreements with those groups that staff worked out on your behalf during December, during the break that you feel entitled to take, despite the charter saying that you should have 2 meetings in December. Under those January 10th agreements, the plain language says that the police and police management employees would, if the council failed to adopt successor MOUs by February 29th, not only cease to pay their 5%, or at least give up that commitment, but also they expected to be refunded every penny of the pension costs that they had paid since January 1st. February 29th has come and gone since the last meeting that I spoke to you. And I've heard no mention of a successor MOU being adopted. And indeed, I heard Councilman Daigle say at a community event that the final labor agreements might not actually be finalized until shortly before election time. So I at least am curious to know.
I'm sorry, I didn't say that.
But then I misunderstood. But I have
I
not
didn't say
heard of an MOU being adopted yet. So I am, at least me, I am curious to know if our police employees, pursuant to the January 10th agreements, have indeed stopped paying their 3.5% and are asking for a refund. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jamie, start again. Yeah, I didn't have time to get those out. So later tonight, you're going to be discussing the fire rings, and I wanted to bring up some interrelated ancillary issues relating to Big Corona Beach. I'm speaking now because tonight coincides with the Persian New Year, and if I don't get home, I won't be able to get parking anywhere within a mile of my house. I suggest you might consider adjourning the meeting early tonight, if you can, so that you can all drive down there and see what Corona Del Mar experiences on every weekend in the summer. There will be thousands of people down there jumping through fire rings and whatnot. The police department posted a crime alert today for Corona Del Mar because of the number of burglaries and car break-ins and whatnot. We need more protection down there. The police department is understaffed. This is kind of an addendum to the other report that I gave on the fire rings, which is in the fire ring packet. The city should start considering relocation of beach users to Crystal Cove. We have 3 miles of virtually unused beach down there, while Big Corona is completely overwhelmed in the summer. The Park Service, I think, tends to want to keep their areas as their little fiefdom and limit use and the ability of people to use those areas. But there is lots of room to add parking, which does not cause any kind of visual impact or physical impact. And a lot of the overflow people, because we're going to have more and more people coming into Big Corona. We have 20 million people and growing, so they're going to go to the beach. And we have a huge beach with nobody on it. So I think the city needs to start looking in that direction. My other concern is security of the beach itself. It's wide open at night, all night long. The only way that I see to mitigate that is to put up some kind of decorative fencing, wrought iron gates at the heliotrope stairs, along the Pirates Cove Rock area, put a gate, maybe an electric gate at the entrance to Big Corona with codes for the people who live on Breakers Drive. But the security of the beach has to start at the bluff. It can't be on the beach. There's people down there every single night, and as soon as one party leaves and the police run them off, an hour later somebody else is down there at 2 in the morning. Traffic in the summer in Corona Del Mar, as everyone knows, is just atrocious. You need to figure out a way to mitigate that. Once the beach is full, and once the beach parking is full, once the streets are full, we have gridlock of people driving around in circles looking for a non-existent space. They need to be redirected by the police elsewhere. I'll leave that to other people to figure out where they can go, but there's no more space. Along with that, I think residential parking permits, like they're being considered for the Balboa area, I think Corona Del Mar needs to be considered for residential parking permits, at least in the summer on the weekends, so that residents, because it's not our job to provide all these facilities with Newport Beach tax money for recreation for everybody in the country. The beach users do not bring any money into Corona Del Mar. They load their coolers at home. They fill their gas tanks at home. They come down. They leave us their traffic and their trash. And they don't spend money here. The people who spend money here are in hotels. They're staying in Newport Coast, the Four Seasons, going to the restaurants and all. But the people that come to the beach really spend very little, but they cost us a lot. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment on non-agenda items? Seeing none, we'll adjourn to closed session.